you know. Like, I remember Chris leading David and I on our bicycles when we lived in California all the way across the Pacific Coast Highway to the beach so we could spend the whole day there and play in the water and then come home just before dinner. I mean, can you imagine doing that today? But we didn't think anything of it back then. And my mom, we obviously lived in a safe neighborhood. But that's the kind of life we had like that. We also played rough and physical games. One of them was climb the tree, and the other one was smear the queer. Sorry about that inappropriate comment, but back then it was kind of funny, I don't know. Now, climbing the tree was David, the middle brother, but older than me. I was climbing a tree, and David said, I'll show you how to climb a tree. And if you knew my brother, you could hear him saying that. So he had to keep going higher and higher. And as he's hanging on the limb, he says, see, and he fell and broke his arm. That's no big deal. I mean, we had a lot of that. But not long after, we were playing Smear the Queer, and David was it. I think we threw the football to him outside, and then Chris and I pounced on him, and we broke his other arm. So I guess you could say back then, life was a contact sport. But you know, also growing up, boys like all of us, we'd like to build stuff and then break it. I don't know why we did that, but we had to see how it worked, right? And that was part of it. I remember one time, Chris, he built this model airplane, and he was meticulous about it. There was no excess glue on the outside of his plane like mine. Every part fit perfectly. But here's an early view of Chris. You know what he had to do? He filled the tail up with lighter fluid, took it out in the backyard and lit it, and then went like this. Isn't that cool? And of course we're going, yeah. We didn't know we were gonna get our hair burned off or whatever. So not only did we have fun, it just showed that Chris had a great sense of humor too. An interesting thing about firstborn children, right? They have a different role to play than the middle son or the baby in the family. So Chris learned to reflect on the values of my father, and my father was an action hero. He was always doing something, always going. He was the guy going out on a cruise to save the country. And I'd say that had a huge impact on how Chris grew up. He took that all to heart. He said, I want to be like my dad. So my dad was very, very committed to his cause, and I think that helped us be the same way. Kind of reminds me of the joke about the ham and egg breakfast. The chicken's involved, but the pig's committed. So our family was definitely like that. And but there came a change in our childhood together. And I remember one time going into Chris's room when he was in junior high to see if he wanted to go out and play. Now Chris was 4.5 years older than me, so he was already getting into new fun stuff. So he held up this white piece of plastic, and I said, what's that? It looked like a ruler. And he said, with this, I can move mountains. And I think he said it's sort of like Moses or something, you know. But he all of a sudden realized the concept of mathematics and leverage. And it was just a major turning point in his mind. Of course, I couldn't picture how that little plastic could scoop a mountain up, so I went out to play. And that might even be the theme of my life, I don't know. But Chris definitely showed that he was no longer thinking like a child, he was thinking like a young man. So I think the change also became really apparent when Chris got in the Boy Scouts. How many guys here were in Boy Scouts? Anybody? One in the back, two? It was kind of a big deal because my dad was in the Boy Scouts. My dad was an Eagle Scout. So Chris went into the Boy Scouts, he had to be an Eagle Scout. And that is no easy task. It takes a minimum of 4 years commitment to get all the merit badges, 21 merit badges or something like that. So I don't think I ever got out of the first level of Boy Scouts. I thought we were just gonna go have fun. you know. But Chris understood the whole concept of being of service to other people. And that also registered in his mind of this is what it takes to be like my dad who did this. In high school, Chris was obviously very good at classes like physics and calculus. He was kind of like a budding Oppenheimer. I'll throw in that movie. It sounds better than Barbie, you know, so. But he wasn't just a brainy kid. I mean, he made the football team, but he didn't get a lot of playing time on that because I've seen pictures of him. He must have weighed 140 pounds or something like that, but he still made the team. So what did he do? He started playing the drums, the snare drum, in the marching band. And he loved that because they had a lot of power. They got to march and he got to pound out that sound. And there was something about sound that my brother liked. He just liked that, but he liked being part of a team. Chris also liked to work on cars, and some of you guys have probably heard the story about him working on a car. But a lot of you haven't, so I'll kind of go into it as quick as I can. I know there's a time constraint here. So my brother Chris and his best friend Dick decided to take my father's engine apart. My dad had gotten a new foreign car called a Renault, and it was about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and it had the engine in the back. So obviously to Chris, with the engine's in the back, let's take this apart. For me, that's like, what? How could you do that? Chris knew that he had to have that all reassembled by the time my dad got home from work. Right? No pressure. So yeah, they got it all back together, but they left off one part. They left the muffler off. And I think I mentioned earlier he likes sound. So we're on a Navy base, right? So they drive the car around the block. And it must have sounded like a tank. I can see people running. My mom ran out of the house shrieking, like, what are you doing? You know? It was a really politically incorrect thing to do, but it was funny. So they brought it in the garage, and of course, by the time my dad got home, Chris was like, yeah, it's running good, Dad. My dad listened, oh yeah, sounds good. And you know, I don't think my dad ever quite understood why my mom needed a double martini that night. So Chris, I remember it was a big deal being the man of the house. And my dad, when Chris got older, would actually tell Chris, now when I go on a cruise, you're in charge, you're the man of the house. And Chris took to that like a duck to water. He was like, oh man, okay, I can do that. And what's really interesting about the whole thing is that Chris became a second father for me. My dad, and I'm not sure if it was because of the demands of his career, was not really I couldn't connect emotionally with him. But for some reason I could with Chris. And Chris was way less judgmental and helpful and patient. And I mean, I think when you think of my brother as being compassionate, that might not be the first word, but I definitely saw that. When I was in high school, I had a paper route. And I thought it'd be cool. I'd just ride around in the afternoon, throw the papers out, you know, like you see on TV and all that, and then I get to go collect the money and buy stuff with it. Of course, I found out that that wasn't true after I bought my first record album. But what's really important is that Chris was the one who got up with me on Sunday mornings to wrap the Sunday papers. And if you remember, those of you that love reading the newspaper, that was like our connection to the world. Didn't we used to get those, open them up, and sit around and kind of look at all these different things? I don't know about you, but I do miss those days. But he never complained about it. He never said, well, that's your job, why don't you do it? Because if it was him, he would have just done it. So somehow he found that compassion with me. It was also my brother who taught me how to really drive a car. I had driver's training, but you know, you're riding with your teacher, some kind of car that's something your grandparents would drive, you know, all that. Chris had a 56 Chevy, and he used to take me out, taught me the stick shift, and turn that radio up, and taught me to parallel park. He made driving fun for me. So by the time I took my driver's test in the VW Beetle, parallel parking was like no sweat, right? And I just passed right through that. Well, as I got older, of course, I didn't need as much help from Chris, but he was always there when I did need it. And even a few years ago, he helped me. I was taking care of my father. He was 98 years old, and I was the one that lived closer, and I actually loved that role. But it was kind of weird for me to be the father and my father to be the child. I don't know if you've ever been in that position, right? So I used to talk to Chris on the phone about things that my dad was doing, like my dad was a teenager. You know, Chris would listen, and finally my dad met someone that was not being very nice to him, and Chris, even though he had cancer, flew all the way out from Virginia to San Diego and helped me confront this person. And I actually think that we saved my father's life, because this person, I don't even know what movie character, Cruella de Vil? Maybe I could think of worse, but the point was that Chris dropped everything, even though he was fighting cancer, to come help me. And he was like, oh, no big deal. I kind of wanted to fly in a plane anyway, you know, like you know how he was. So a few weeks ago, I asked some family members to give me their one-word descriptions of my brother Chris. And here are some words that I received, and I think they're very accurate. Patriot, loyal, responsible, patient, stoic, steadfast, witty, and strong. And I see a lot of nodding heads out there. And he, basically, the whole time I knew Chris, he had all those qualities. It's amazing. So I know I probably run way over my allotted time, but I wanted to kind of give you the whole story from my perspective, and help you get an understanding of Chris. For even though he's not physically with us anymore, the many memories that we have and share help keep him alive. And he'll always be right here for me, and I'm sure for many of you. So Chris, I miss you, I love you, and hope you and Missy are having a great adventure. Thank you so much.